Hello, welcome to, let me turn this around. Hold on. Hello, welcome to my Tuesday night painting demo. I'm just a head sticking in here in the corner of the mount. I have it angled a little bit downward so that you can, let me turn the sound off, have it angled a little bit downward so you can see a little more of my palette. And tonight I'll be painting a young woman named Jensen Jennings. She's someone I did find her originally on Sketchy, which is an app that you can find photo references. People post their own selfies and photos of their family, and so that you can have photos that you can use that you have permission to use for paintings and drawings, and you can post those back to the app for people can look at your drawings and paintings in relationship to the original photographic source. It's a really fun app. It only works on iPhone, so if you have an iPhone, I highly recommend checking it out. Um, so, oh, I have this sort of full screen tonight. Let me see if I can fix that because I do want to see the chat. I don't know how this works. Maybe. Oh, I see. Click on that. Nope, wrong one. Try it again. Click on. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated tonight. Um, it's not that one. Manage moderators, chat. And where did I just click on that? Sorry, just give me a minute while I fix my screen. If I can remember. Oh, okay, it must be that one then. Okay, great. So hi from Sydney. Who? Oh, so that's Charisse. I did talk to someone earlier who said who texted me saying that they were going to watch from Sydney and want to know what time it was. Maybe that's you. Maybe that's someone else. Maybe I have a couple people from Sydney. I know there was someone from either Auckland or what was the city? I think it was from Auckland, asking me what time is 9 o'clock Eastern time, 9 p.m. Eastern time in Auckland, and so I had to do some calculations to figure out it was 3 in the afternoon. So I think it's 5 o'clock in Sydney. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it was the other way around. Maybe it was 1. That's right, 1 p.m. in Sydney. Anyway, so I'm going to get started here. Yep, I'm just going to move this a little closer. So essentially what I've done here is I'm working on a 12 by 16 panel, and I've sized this photograph of oops, I just closed that out. I didn't want to do that. Um, Need to get back into Photoshop. Sorry. I sized this. Let me shrink her down so you can see the whole image. So I've sized it so that it is sort of 12 by 16 inches in the monitor itself. And when I look at it at 100% scale, it's exactly the same size as my panel so that I can measure back and forth. This is called, well, technically it's, if you're standing the same distance from both the monitor and the panel, then it's a sight size painting, which is generally used for still lifes, but also is commonly used in portraiture. And it's a way of you can visually see in your field of vision the object that you're painting, and then you can switch very quickly to the panel, and you can quickly see where the differences are between the two. You do have to get the painting developed quite far enough along so that you can sort of see those little differences. And I did lose my YouTube channel here, so let me see if I can get that back. So you can see the differences. If I have the YouTube channel up, then I can see your questions when you're chatting. It's a little hard for me to read it on my phone. So, okay, I have it back up, and Okay, it was you. I see that. Anyone else want to chime in? Tell me where they're watching from. I love to see where in the world you are, because sometimes I had someone from Vietnam, from Finland, from South Africa, um, and then a lot of people from Canada, Midwest. So it's kind of interesting. Occasionally, have a avid watcher that tunes in from Alabama, so that's good. I did a little bit more promoting this week, so we might have a few more people um, coming on board. I'm sort of learning social media as I go, and I've been big on Instagram, just a little bit on YouTube, but I have not done so much social media marketing on Facebook. It's taken me a while to figure out how to use it. So I'm just since I can talk and paint at the same time, I might as well just get right into the painting because that's what you guys are here for. So I'm going to get back to 100% scale, remove the rulers, pull this up right next to where I'm painting, and make sure that I have the have the window pulled out enough so that there's none hidden. I can't fit the whole image in the monitor, so I do have to move it up and down as I work. But I'm going to start from the top. And oh, well, it would help if I put some actual solvent in the brush cleaner. So what I do, I talked about this in my video, is that pour what's in the can back into a jar and let it sit, and it does clarify the solvent because the paint particles do are heavier and they drop down to the bottom. Okay, so now finally I'm going to get back into it. I just have a kind of a round bristle brush here that is actually good for the initial drawing, and I'm just going to put sort of a grayish color on the palette, just kind of thinly, so I have something to draw with. You can do any color if you're going to end up painting back over it, and just sort of get this negative space around her head. This sort of stair steps down, but I'm not worried about that yet. I'm just trying to get the larger forms first before I worry about any of the details. Just putting it down here, I'm going to have to stop and to sort of measure at some point just to make sure I'm not wildly off. So this is where I start doing some of my measuring. That looked pretty good. Her hairline to the top, that's pretty good. Just where her pupil is. This is where it starts to get really important to have things like the eyes in the right place, or things start to get strange quickly. Well, since I didn't paint the eye, I have no idea. Let's just put it in. So, just a little indication. Check the height. Okay, hello, Columbus, Ohio. That's Medeiros. Medeiros. Um, do be a little more careful. Okay, I'm measuring right from the top edge. So I eyeballed that eye, and actually it's a whole eye distance lower. So that's where where the top of the lower lid is, and then the bottom. And eyes tend to be, she's pretty much straight on to us. There is a little bit of a shift from looking a little bit at our left. So, um, so it's not perfectly straight on. And I can look to see the horizontal. She's got a little bit of a tilt. There's a little bit of distortion in the nose because her hand is pulling her face a little bit, or squishing her face, I should say. So I have maybe like a 5-degree angle throughout the whole thing. So I'm just going to put those lines in. Just so, this is where I think a lot of people get off, is that their paintings get off a little bit. They lose sort of that the angle from one form to the next, and they don't really see it, and sometimes it helps just to just draw that right from the beginning. Gives you that sense of perspective and structure if those are all aligned. And they may not be, depending on the expression, they may not have perfect alignment. Um, and then also it's helpful to find the center axis of everything. It'll be something like her nose comes out like this, and then there's a little bit of a shift in her mouth. It is being pushed over to the side, so we want to get that in there. Normally her lips, the feeling is her lips would be coming out more to the left if they're really kind of like pushed out a little bit the way they are, except that for the distortion of her expression. So I said that the eyes will have about one eye distance apart. Don't really have the full eye there, but if I look from corner to corner, so it's actually just a little bit shorter there. That's pretty close. So let me find this measurement here, the tear duct to the edge. Is right there. So I can put in her eye. So there's two kind of main parts of drawing or getting sort of the underlying structure. One is looking at where things sit in two-dimensional space, and then the other part is understanding what it's doing three-dimensionally. So I have the length of this eye, and then between, so this eye actually I need to push out just a little bit further. You can double check that. It is where it needs to be, so there has to be a little bit of adjustment back and forth between the two eyes, and I'm going to see if I can get a little bit of the color in here just to clean this up a little bit. She has kind of, I've played around with the levels a little bit of this photograph just so I had a little more value range to work with and kind of see the form a little bit more. So this, I'm going to just put in that dark edge on the outer part of her nose. Just going to keep on measuring as I go along because I don't want to have anything get too far off. Sometimes I'll go painting blithely away only to find out later that I have a nose that's a full inch off from where it needed to be, and I wondered why things weren't looking right. Okay, once I get some of these landmarks in, I'm just going to put in large areas of color because I'm really looking to try to get the overall form right. I can just come in with a lighter pink right in the middle area of the nose, although that looks very gray. So let's see if I can get something a little cleaner. Sometimes the trick to getting people can say, oh, well, my colors get so muddy. How do you keep your colors from getting muddy? And the answer is to be very deliberate about mixing certain colors, keeping them clean. If I know that I want to get a fairly light pink in here, then I have to make sure that I'm mixing just the white and whatever red I determine is the right hue for the case. So that's still too dark. And I know I have a very light area right here where the that keystone triangle shape in her nose is catching the light in some of her forehead. In the photo, it goes to white there. I'm not quite at white. There's still quite a bit of a couple steps down in value, but that's okay. I can keep on pushing white as I go in there. And while I'm here, I'm going to get a little bit of blue and white for this corner of the eye. It's just through practice that I know what is the right value, even though you can't really judge the values at this stage of the painting because you just don't have the colors around it to judge. It's everything will look too dark because there's so much white panel. Just gonna go for this. I'm gonna remeasure these things. So hi Alex from San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. Welcome. I don't know where that is exactly, but so that pupil may be just a little bit too high, but not too far off. And just drop it down a little. So yeah, that looks pretty good actually. And then I'm just going to restate that upper eyelid. Let's get a little bit of the green in the eyes, a little bit lighter. So I do want the eyes light enough that gets sort of that luminescent quality to it. Um, it's when the light, generally, most faces, the lighting comes from above, and which means that because the eye is sort of like this lens with something behind it, um, with your retina behind it, what you're seeing is the light hitting the sort of the colors of your iris. It's not really the retina, it's the iris that the light passes through. And so when the light is above, if you think about it hitting almost like inside a disc shape, it's going to light the lower um, the lower hemisphere of that disc shape. So if you think about the light coming from above, it's going to light this area below. So that's sort of what I'm doing right now. It's sort of creating that sense of lighting for the eye. Just get a little bit of the red that you're starting to see in the lower lid. Also, I want to start creating that three-dimensionality. Not the eye isn't as flat, and so I know from experience that if I put a highlight or lighter color right in the middle of the curve of that eye, because the light is coming pretty much from straight on, that will start to give that illusion that it's curving. Let's just, I know it's a little bit too early, but I'm just going to throw a little highlight in reflection in the eye itself so I can start to get that feeling of the glassiness of the eye. I don't want to I don't want to go overboard with all the tricks though. It will start looking too a little cartoony if I go too far. So I'm just doing it now just so I can start to see things and I can always push it back a little bit. She has a kind of a little bit of auburn color in her hair. I've played a little bit with the levels, so there may be a little bit of distortion there. So, but I want to make sure. I know I have a bad habit of doing this, like with the hair crossing over the eye. I'll tend to keep on moving the hair further and further out. You see where I started it? It really needs to be coming in right here, right over the eye. I don't know. There's some part of me that is afraid of destroying the things that I already put down, so I'm a little bit protective, I guess, and needlessly so it does um, make for a weaker painting when you can't really get those things to overlap correctly. And so I have a light area. I'm just not going to put any paint there yet and just focus on where it just goes a little bit darker here. And just really thinking kind of um, from piece to piece and a little bit structurally as I go. Want to get this measurement right from the edge of the nostril to the hand. That's pretty good, even though I'm putting a pretty thick line, so there's lots of room for error there. Have Sharon here from Australia. So Sharon, say hi to 33 Charisse, who's in Sydney. Don't know if you're in Sydney also, but should be early afternoon there, according to my calculations, and it's going to get pretty late here. You guys are um, probably having some warmer weather around now. You're in the spring, headed towards the winter. We're in the fall I mean, spring headed towards the summer. We're in the fall heading towards the winter. Winter's coming. Winter is coming. Yes, it's already showing its ugly face. Um, okay, so just throwing some of the natural color that she has in her cheeks, and then that's combined with the shadow of the hair, giving that a little bit more reds and browns. But that's necessary to help with the curvature. And then just to think about this cheek is coming out towards us, it's dropping down a little bit, and then it starts to curve up towards um, curve up towards us, and then we have this area that's like almost perpendicular to our vision, so we just only see a little bit edge of that. And I almost have no white on my palette, so I don't know how I'm working here. So I need to get a little bit of white down. I been playing around with I have titanium white here, but I've been playing around with a white called brilliant white. I'm sorry, radiant white. I think that's the color name. Yes, radiant white. So it's a color. It's a gambling color also. They're I'm use all gambling colors. They're artist grade color, which is their highest quality colors. And so the only difference between the titanium white and the radiant white is the binder. One uses the titanium white uses linseed oil, and the radiant white uses safflower oil, which is a much clearer. I mean, it doesn't really have any yellowing like the linseed oil. So it just has overall it has a uh, much brighter sense to it because it's so cool in nature. We tend to associate that coolness um, with brightness. We just get a little bit of that nostril in there, just a touch of the quinacridone red and the alizarin permanent. Just throw that in there. And then the other nostril, I'm just going to keep it fairly red, even though in the photo it almost looks black. Okay, so I have to be careful of this angle. It looks like I'm a little bit off here, um, not giving her enough nose to her nose. So I'm going to push it out just a little bit further there, and try to keep that dark edge accent there that's on the far edge. And then just a sense that her nose is pointing up a little bit, so I want to keep that sort of gesture that's there. Make sure that I have the tip kind of pointing a little bit on the upward direction. And I noticed that I'm headed a little bit too cool with the colors, so I want to make sure I get some yellows and oranges in there to balance it out. So just keep on mixing a little bit of orange into my naphtha red to get the right hue. Okay, and then her nose, it has a little bit of a sense of elongation here, so I want to keep this kind of narrow the way it is in the photo. So be careful not to broaden her nose too much. Yep. So I had the thought that I was going to paint larger areas in very large general forms, and then I was going to get more specific, but it looks like, this is just the way it works sometimes. I'm falling into painting from shape to shape. I know where things are and I know where I want them to be, and I'm just coming in with the closest thing to the color that I'm seeing, and I can go back and restate those colors later and adjust them, but it's helpful just to, if I can just come in with being in the right ballpark initially until I can start to see things and adjust them subtly. So I have Kiara, that's in Florida. Welcome. And let me see. Charisse says one day it's 37, which doesn't mean a lot to me because I'm not used to centigrade. The next it's 20. So I'm guessing that's a little bit like 100 degrees and then going down to 40 degrees, something like that. Um, I may be wildly off, but I'm just too used to Fahrenheit. It's a little hard for me to kind of picture in my head what the I know one's warm and one's cool. So I know that 0 Celsius is 32 degrees. So you're not quite at zero yet. Okay, and I'm just going to start to indicate where these lips are, and I can go a little bit deeper and darker red. That's kind of the harder color to hit, and I can always come back a little bit from that. I want to make sure that I'm thinking about the forms in her lips. Like there's three major forms on the upper lip. There's these side wings, and then generally there's this center part, and it's like I said, it's pushed a little bit to one side. I want to make sure I get the darkest red in the separation of her lips. Let's pull. I got a little bit of red here still, and I just gonna get that little bit of form in there. When I get a little bit of the upper eyelid too while I'm here, just I used to think that where you see like very thin lines, that I'd have to get a little detailed brush out to draw those, and it's not always true. You can use a fairly thick brush, and just by doing overlapping strokes, you can kind of work through kind of the way Photoshop works, or Illustrator works with two paths or two areas that one cancels the other out. You can kind of do the same thing with a brush, where you put one brush stroke and then you put another different colored brush stroke right next to it, just leaving a little bit of overlap, and then you can get that very thin line that way. But it requires that the area around it is kind of has to remain simple if you're going to be able to do it right, or that you keep on using that technique all around to be able to get some of those um, smaller areas of light. Then it becomes sort of a math problem at some point, that you have to figure out what to paint in which order to be able to get what you want. Okay, just get, if I can get a little bit more of the shadow here, then I can get right up into the where the eyebrow starts. Let's see, not getting the right color. I think it's a little bit of orange and a little bit of black, and I think I can get that. Okay. And starting to see, now I have enough going here where I can start comparing um, that side size kind of effect the with the photo, or the photo I have up on my monitor. Let's get this up going here. That's the shape of the forehead. The other brow is going to indicate where it is, just so I know that I'm in the right ballpark. That's going to get much darker. And I can see I have the face. And now she has a very fairly square face, or at least it's not long. It's much round, sort of somewhat square. So I want to make sure that I don't give it too much height, and that I'm giving it enough rim out on the sides. Um, Let me see. Sharon says, good coast Queensland, beautiful one day and perfect the next. Good Coast, I guess that's the name of the town, Good Coast. I wonder if it's like Porpoise Spit, if anyone knows the reference. It's very small town, fictional town. Okay, and just can use that same blue sort of for the whites of the eye. Just want to get a lot of blue in there because you can see there's in the photograph the whites of her eyes look very blue. Um, okay. Oh, Gold Coast. Okay, not Good Coast. Okay, that makes a little more sense. Not and not Porpoise Spit either. Um, okay. I don't know. Maybe that is the name of a real town. That would be somewhat tragic if it was. Okay, just getting the same idea with her pupil. Okay, so what's giving her that kind of bored expression is that how low her eyelids are over the eye. I didn't paint it that way initially, but I can start to pull the lashes down. Um, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Polish 19 sort of Art Deco painter. I guess you would call her style somewhat Art Deco. Tamara Lempicka. She she would do these fairly geometric shaped figurative paintings, um, usually of I guess of men and women, but usually high society looking people. And they always had this kind of expression on their face that they were um, kind of arrogant and bored. And she achieved a lot of that just by how heavy she made or how low she made the upper eyelid. It's kind of interesting kind of idea. Um, just um, simplified that expression to such a degree. It was just a matter of where she placed the eyelid. Okay, so keep on going, just filling in little areas at a time, using somewhat of a small brush today. Usually I come in with a much larger brush, but this one's not hurting me yet. If I find that I'm just dabbing, trying to get little details too early, then I'll switch to a larger brush. And let's get that little bit of the fanned out lash here just to start to see the expression. Okay, and I'm missing sort of the turn here of the nose up here. Want to make sure that there's enough value and color change that we start to see it. And then we get a little bit too here. Some have to keep that color a little bit cleaner here to get the reds showing. Okay, now want to get a little bit of the pull of those lips. They get pulled upward a little bit, and then her lower lip is very pronounced. So gotta make sure that I give that enough depth. It was interesting that so when I do this sort of photo selection process where I put it out to my followers on Instagram, now I also did it a little bit on Facebook also. I When I first did it, I had a whole mixture of I had three women and one guy and different kind of sizes and expressions, and I had a lot of people that wanted to choose the guy, but then they thought, oh, but they liked one of the women better, and but they really felt that I should paint a guy. And so it just kind of became this complicated calculation for most people that they wanted to choose one way, but they ended up choosing another just because, I don't know, they just wanted to choose whatever they thought would make the best painting, which is generally what I want, how I want people to choose. So now when I do a selection, I try to select from a very kind of narrow range. If I'm doing all kids, I just recently did a selection of young girls, and they were all about the same age range. Although two were sisters, so they were, had to be at least a year or two apart. And so there isn't this conflict between, oh, but I want you to paint a guy, or I want you to paint an adult, or whatever it is. So this time, and I have to say, I paint more women than men. I just have more reference photos, good reference photos of women, young women, that I do of young men, or even any age, because of the number of selfies that young women are taking. That just leads to more photos and more choices. And so that's what I end up painting a lot of the time. And I think at times people tend to maybe respond more to young women, and even young men when I've done young men, but more so young women, which is kind of interesting, since a large chunk of my Instagram audience is are young women. They tend to also respond to images of young women, which is kind of, I don't know what that says about us as people, that don't necessarily gravitate to the opposite sex. Sometimes people want to see something that kind of speaks to them directly, I guess. Anyway, I'm getting into the anthropological a little bit too much here, but anyway, this time I got just a ton of comments about how people were wishing that they had a much wider range to choose from. They didn't like that so many of the women were pushing their lips out and had white eyes, and had similar expressions, and only one they felt looked really kind of natural, and that was the one that was actually the most posed. It was um, shot by professional photographers, so the one they said was shot by the professional photographer looked more realistic, I guess, more and less posed. But actually, I guess in a way, the selfies were more real life. Um, I didn't really think that they were so much mugging for the camera, but the sense is the camera is very close to them, and there's quite a bit of distortion because of the relationship um, to the camera. And so I got a little bit of negative feedback about the choices that were part of the selection. And but a different day, there would just be different choices. I did ask people to, if they wanted to see something else, to recommend something. So I'm going ahead and I'm defining that tear duct um, area, and I have to make the carved into the white of the eye a little bit too much. So let's see if I can get that mixed color in my palette, that light blue. I have quite a bit of pink in my brush that keeps on contaminating my mixture, so let's try it one more time. There we go. So let's widen this up a little. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. And then the far side of the eye is um, is quite a bit darker, not catching quite as much light. So I'm just going to make sure that it is at least a step or two darker. Okay, and then the lower lid, again, darker and redder than the flesh tones around it. And let me define the shape of the tip of the nose a little bit better. It does have sort of this diamond shape to it that I want to get. And okay, just that ringing is just our front door opening. Okay, so that's defined a little bit better. And now if I start to throw in a few accents, then you really can start to see the form coming forward. If I'm really kind of feel like that I have her lips a bit too low, so I'm going to measure a little bit. Um, so Clara says, I think it's great you give your audience a chance to choose the portrait you paint. I mean, to some degree, I'm spending a lot of time going through photos to find ones that are eligible before you even get to that point where you're choosing, which is fine. I don't want to paint a photo that I'm not finding interesting enough to paint. So I have to do a little bit of that, but I do want, I think it gives the audience a chance to engage a little bit, give an opinion. Now I have the center line of the lips in the right place, so it's just maybe that I'm just not making her lips her upper lip quite full enough. So I'm just going to add a little bit and make sure I'm going a little bit lighter and more orange, because that's sort of the direction that the higher part of her lip is going in, and this side it gets a little bit darker. Okay, so um, and again, this center form in the lips is getting kind of pushed over a little bit, so I want to keep that in mind as I'm defining this shape a little bit, that it's kind of smushed over just a little bit this way. Okay, that's good. And I'm not quite orange enough in the colors on her lips, so I'm just going to just go for it there. Just throw in a lot of orange. And then if I just throw in kind of a pinkish highlight there, then it's just going to start to read pretty well. Okay, so that's enough for the lips. And now I'm going to widen her philtrum, which is this kind of groove underneath the nose, and I'm going to reshape that nostril a little bit, a little closer. Comes up a little bit higher. And again, like I said, her nose feels very narrow, so I am going to carve into that side a little bit. Okay, that's actually looking like it's headed in the right direction. Just give her a little bit more underneath. Okay, so this is starting to read dimensionally. You can start to see the nose coming out, pointing a little bit away to the left. That color underneath. I've been struggling with this, get this color and value right here. And I can go as these areas of the face they go have more highlight, go whiter. I can get a little thicker with the paint, and that's sort of a technique that creates a little more depth, because the texture of the thicker paint attracts the eye and seems to be coming forward, just having more texture, where something that's smoother or blurred tends to recede a little bit more. So you can get a little extra depth out of paint that you can't really get in a photograph. Sort of, especially if the photograph doesn't have that texture in there. But if you know it's coming forward, you can play around with. Sorry, need a little bit of water here. Oh, hold on. Oh, that's better. Okay. So this is something that Rembrandt would do quite a bit. I mean, I talked to him last week, and he said definitely that's what he was trying to do. By adding lots of texture to the paint, then he can sort of manipulate you around forms in the face almost in a sculptural way. In a way, the way he painted almost was more like sculpture. There's so much dimensionality to the paint that It is like he's sort of putting globs on, one side or another of each form to really create a sense of um, a sculptural sense of that form. Okay, so here she has quite a bit of light areas in her cheek. Her lightest light is like right across the middle here, has a touch of yellow in it. So I can do like a lot of white and yellow right here. The same, similar here in this area where I said it's like curving up. And then I need to put in a little bit of the darks here just to kind of give a little more reference to where I am. And this is where a bigger brush really will come in handy because I want to get those full sense of the full locks of her hair, that each stroke kind of can be a whole section of hair. Let's just get a little bit of the orange, red, auburn color going in here. And then I have right against her face is her hand, and that's just catching the light here, just a very light area, even lighter than what I've painted there. And then her chin is starting to fall kind of away from the light, so it is going quite a bit darker than the rest of the face. Not completely dark here, though. You get a little bit of light. And the naturally, even, although you're not seeing so much in this photo, the area around the mouth and chin will be a little bit on the greener side than the rest of the face. The forehead tends to go a little bit more orange, and across the cheeks and the nose tends to be a little bit redder and pinker. So not always true 100%, but it's worth looking for when you're painting to see what those, see if you can see those color shifts, and try to honor them a little bit as a way of making the flesh tones look a little more natural. Just trying to get, for very broad strokes, a sense of um, those forms there. So trying to pay attention to some of the smaller forms around her temple and her eyebrows. And I have a lot of orange and pinks around the perimeter of her face where her cheeks are dropping away from us. And I need these transitional color here between those darker reds and the lightest part of her cheek there. So need to add more white, get a little bit more pure color, and it's usually in the transitions where you'll see the most colors and flesh tones, where something's starting to drop into shadow. Just the edge of that shadow often has quite a bit of color in it. Now I'm trying to let the brush strokes start to help define the form, the direction of the strokes, and the thickness of the paint, and even the um, textures of the strokes really help pull your eye, or can really help pull your eye around the form. Okay. So, so Chiara or Ciara, don't know how it's pronounced, and you can't tell me. From your experience, what part of the face do you feel is most difficult for you to paint? I think usually around the eyes, and it's the part that I think that I've overcome the difficulty the most. It used to be I'd paint an eye and it would be, a little bit too high, a little bit too low, but it was a great eye, and I'd be very reluctant to to repaint it, to move it, to change it. And then I just found like, you need to, if you're really going to make um, the anatomy accurate or feel like things are in the right place, sometimes you do have to move things around. And so what's happened is that I just got so used to moving things around that I could repaint something very quickly if I needed to. Something that used to take me a long time, I could do in a few strokes. I can get very quickly to where the same thing that was already painted but in a different location. And the better that I got at that, the more freely I was able to paint because I didn't worry so much about ruining something that I painted. I could just always repaint it. So that's area underneath the eye goes much more yellow. I've been also very shy about using yellows in my paintings, and I find that overall they end up leaning a little bit too cool. And so I'm getting over that. So again, we want to think about this sort of swoop up that happens here. Try to really get that sense that the lips are pushed out a little bit. And so all the strokes and color changes make sure that they kind of help, and placement help to emphasize that that change. So okay, so that's looking pretty good there. Want to make sure that get the that jaw line, so that's going to start to fall into shadow here, and that's really about the only place in the face that isn't truly in shadow is right under here. But that darkness is going to help support the lighter part of her face. And then I want to make sure that her neck, even though it is catching a little bit of light, is quite a bit darker than the rest of the face. So it feels like the face is coming forward and the neck is dropped back so that so it's not catching quite as much light, and that will really create that sort of more a little bit more sense of depth. Again, I have to get enough of that shadow color in the, so I have to go a little bit darker here. I can play a little bit with that edge until it feels right. And again, I have an accent between the hand and her face, where it's pushing up her face. It's a fairly thin line, and it cuts right into the mouth there and then comes across, and the heel of her hand, and then that drops down. Okay, so if I can, I want to try to recreate the hand with just the fewest number of shapes and colors, because I want to at least start off with the simplest shapes, the simplest idea of the hand, and then I can go in and paint smaller shapes if I want to. Sometimes it's just really nice to leave some of those things very simple, simply stated, and not to compete with the other parts of the painting that that you have a lot more detail in. I think that's also another mistake that a lot of artists make is they feel like, oh, they put in quite a bit of detail in one part of the painting, they feel like they have to get equal amount of detail in other parts, and so you just end up moving, giving it, making a painting that you're not really telling the viewer where it is that you want them to look. And if you think about a painting as it's sort of you're creating a stage direction of where what you want people to look at and what they want them to do or think when they see your painting. And so sometimes you have to do a little bit of staging to get people to look in the right place. And so and those kind of things can make a good painting into a really strong painting if you have that level of control. Um, so like for me, I want this part of her face, I want that to be the focus. A little bit of the craziness of the hair, I'm going to have some chaos there, and I want the rest really to remain really simple. And so Dalton asks, "Who are your art inspirations?" And I would, wow, so quite a few, but I'd have to start with 19th century realists, especially John Singer Sargent, Joaquin Sorolla, Anders Zorn. Um, I would have to say Fetchin, um, who is a Russian painter that's, I think is Russian, who um, painted in the Southwest United States. Um, Also, some American Impressionists like William Merritt Chase and who else of that? And Schild Hissam, for example. But I really like the realists more kind of their brushwork than the Impressionists, even more so than the American Impressionists. Although you would have to say that William Merritt Chase really falls into that line of a traditional realist painter that uses a bravura brushwork as opposed to something that's more like an impressionist broken stroke. Um, Childesham, his work is more like a um, broken stroke that's typical of like the European impressionists. And but I have to say that the sort of the top three there is Zorn, Sargent, and Sorolla. Sorolla is a Spanish, I guess they call him a Spanish impressionist, but he really is kind of a realist in a way that he uses the brushwork, but he has such an amazing color sense that people just, it's hard for people not to think of it as impressionism, although it bears very little resemblance to impressionist paintings. Excuse me. Um, so this is where I can start to compare and adjust little things. I don't want to have such of a fresh look right now that I don't want to go crazy changing too much. It doesn't have to bear a perfect likeness to her. Um, it lacks a little refinement, so I have to decide: do I want to go thicker and more stylized, or do I want it to be a more refined painting? Do I want to exaggerate colors? Here, I do want to get that lighter sense. Went a little bit too dark there, but I don't want to lose the colors. So try to just add a little more yellow and white to that area. Try to soften some of those transitions. And I think that that will increase a little bit of sense of realism that I'm looking for without it, not it, don't want it to look too cartoony. Um, And so, contemporary painters, I've put together Pinterest pages for myself as a way of figuring out what it is I like. If I can put together whole boards of painters, both past and present, of that I really like their work, and I can pick out particular paintings and things that I like about them, put the get together into a board, then I can really start to see, oh yes, this is what I'm gravitating to. This is what I want to get into my paintings. So I'm not looking at any one painter anymore. I'm just looking at sort of big general ideas of, a lot of what was on my board, I realized, is paintings that were partially unfinished. I really liked that whole idea of something that looked so fairly accurate, somewhat believable in parts of the painting, and then it would just fade off to big unfinished areas. And I really like that dichotomy. So that's something that I tried in a whole bunch of paintings. Some paintings I've been doing a little more finished, and others I just try to leave whole areas understated or unpainted. And I think that some of those paintings ended up being very successful. Um, so I want to push the dark reds a little bit here in Getting a little bit of shadow from the hair. Okay, got a little crazy there, so I got to pull it back a little. So try to get that transition right. A little cleaner, pinker here. There we go. And so here where you see the brushwork is really helping move the eye around the form a little bit. Okay, so how about Pinot? The, yeah, so Pinot. There's things I really like about his work, um, especially the brushwork, the color, the sense of color, and then at the same time, I paint a lot of women, but um, I try to make sure that they stand well as the individuals, not so much as objects. And the way he paints women is a much more way of he very much objectifies women the way he paints them, and they're always very sweet and fairly sexualized, and so I think that in a way it kind of there's kind of a gimmicky almost uh, how do I even describe it? How do I go there? Um, so so the paintings themselves is about this kind of um, eroticism. I mean, you don't look at the paintings; they're not erotic like pornography, but they're erotic in the sense that it's women sort of in kind of subservient, sort of domestic roles, carrying pitchers of water and in the kitchen, and with the way they're dressed, with very chesty, and it just overall it just kind of feels it it feels I'm just losing the words to describe it, but I think you have the sense of what I mean. And I think that while I like the work, I have a hard time with the subject matter, to be frank. I don't see, if I ever painted a painting that went so far in that direction, I would just feel like, no, it's like, I'm not, it's um, not really working for me. Um, I think that there's painters that deal with similar subject matter and they deal with it in a much it's done much more tastefully. If I look at the work of Dan Gerhardt's, you could say, well, the subject matter is very similar, but at the same time, it doesn't feel as doesn't feel sexualized in that kind of way. So um, and I have to be careful. I paint a lot of selfies where the people taking the pictures are also um, I don't know, they're kind of very intimate. There's a lot of emotion and expression there, and there's almost a sense of voyeurism to them, or there can be. And but I kind of feel like, well, in a way, because they're selfies, they're people that have given their permission for me or other artists to paint them. There is this kind of um, relationship then between the subject, the viewer, and the artist in a way, all three. Um, so it is kind of this different relationship. It's not this complete objectification of the female form, or even the male form. In some of the male paintings I've done, there is a little bit of that kind of that raw emotion with intimacy. I can think of a couple that I did. One of the um, the reference photo is of a young man named Logan, for one example, where you'll probably see it very quickly if you go to my Instagram page where he's wearing this bright orange patterned shirt. And there's another one whose name is, I want to say it's Gustavo. I may be wrong, um, but there is that same sense of there is this a little bit um, of sexual tension there, but it's not objectified like Pinot paintings. I probably said a lot more about Pinot than I probably should have. Um, Schmid, yeah, so Richard Schmid, he's an amazing painter. There's no doubt about it. He's one of the uh, um, current masters of, especially of alla prima painting. And so Randy said Spanish macho for sure. And I also think probably part of Pinot's thing is that the work becomes highly sellable to a certain clientele, and so where something works, he'll keep on doing it. I could say there's also another painter that's kind of in that same direction, but I would say he does do it in a way that's much more tasteful, which is let's see if I can think of his name. Vologov, I think it is. And he's on Instagram too. Does some amazing work and um, is really a master at getting sort of painting techniques, a mixture of brush and palette to get certain textures and colors, and paints a lot of women in sort of out in fields, out in along water, standing in water. There's some of that. Anders Zorn actually kind of went there with a lot of his paintings. Did um, and I wrote a little article that I posted on Instagram too about nudity in 19th century realist paintings, especially by those painters that I mentioned. And there isn't a whole lot of nudity except for Anders Zorn paintings where he paints women in doing all manners of activities but naked, sculpting, rowing boats, hiking, cooking, but all naked. And it's kind of this weird, a little bit of a weird thing. It's just like as if just women just went through life naked and he just happened to stop by to paint them. And so just just a thought there, how it relates to Pinot's work um, or any of those other painters that I just mentioned. I'm not sure where his influence fell in all of that. So I'm still not quite going dark enough in the neck, and I'm not going warm enough. So I'm going to try to get some orange and black and reds right here in the shadow part. Try to push it back a little bit. And okay, that's looking a little bit better. And I want to get a little bit of that deep reds in the cheek here. Try to carve in a little bit, trying to get the hollow of that cheek to read and have the sense that this is really coming forward at us, especially if I soften that transition a little bit. And now you can really start to read that form. So Ripon said, I saw your live videos. They were long but really helpful. Sorry if I missed something, but how do you finish those paintings? Because the final paintings I have seen on Instagram are really stunning. So I'm usually not videoing that part because I can only do so much in 2 or 3 hours, and usually I'm just getting to the paintings just to the point where they're ready to start to drive to the finish. And so some of those I'll work on sometime later that same night or the next day or in the next couple days after that to really get them finished. And it's just sort of maybe making small refinements. Sometimes it's repainting whole areas that weren't quite right. And then, but it's really hard to video that whole process or to be live in that whole process because kind of have to shut down certain parts of my brain to really hone in and try to figure out what's working and what's not, and um, try to be a little more deliberative about it. And it's hard to be deliberative when you have a whole audience watching you. You kind of want to move along quickly, and in that whole process of stepping back, looking, thinking, not painting, deciding where it needs to change, and then just putting down a few strokes. That's that's a little I don't know. Maybe the audience would enjoy that, but I think that's a little bit. It stops being a little bit less entertaining, and but yeah. So some of that process is how I get to a finish. You really have to study what the thing is doing. Let's see if I can get a little more refinement in her eyes. I kind of like the very um, direct painterliness of it, but kind of feel like I'm losing what the eye is doing because it's just not refined enough. She has fairly thickly painted eyeshadow, which kind of combines with the color of her pupil. And then she just has this little spot of white. Oh, I'm going to use a different brush. Had a brush out here for a little while. It's like it dried with a little bit of paint in it, and so it kind of came to a point and is a little bit stiff. And so I'm going to use that to try to get that, if I can get it to keep its point. It didn't really do the job, did it? Okay. There was another brush I was. Sometimes I have too many brushes that are all up, and then I don't have a good detail brush left. So um, sometimes I use a flat where I can use the very corner of the flat or the bright to get that mark. Okay, that might be good enough. I just need to come back in a little bit with the black to refine that a little. Okay. Okay, so and now I am, too bad I'm not going to keep that really fresh open brushwork there. I am going to come in and refine this a little because this is an important part of the expression on her face, and I'm not going for the overall aesthetic of just really thick brush strokes. I do want to have areas that are a little more refined. So if I look at the work of like Skip Lipke, Malcolm Lipke, this sort of is having that sensibility right now, and I think I just wanted a little more refined than that. And there's also John Lariva paints that way. Milton Kayabashi, also very similar sensibility. Um, Kayabayashi, I think I'm pronouncing it right. He actually was um, painting buddies with Malcolm Lipke. They both painted together. I think they lived together, and so their styles and for a while got to be very similar. And so if you look at, sometimes their paintings can be indistinguishable from each other. Um, I think John Lariva probably came along a little bit later and liked that style of painting and his work also. And there's a few other painters out there that have that sort of similar kind of very thick painterly color approach to painting, kind of stylized in a certain way. missing a little bit of shape of the nose here. Got the nostril shape wrong. I wouldn't say wrong, but not not really matching what is going on there. This comes down a little bit lighter. And then again, trying to bring the tip of that nose up a little bit higher. Go out to the side just a little bit more. And I'm going to try to refine the shape there of the eyelid there. Okay, that's a little bit better. And remember what I said before, to get that sense of curve of the eye, you can go ahead and put sort of the lightest light there in the center, especially if the light is straight on, and that will help create that sense of curvature of the eye. Let's get a little bit more of the color that I'm seeing there, not changing the value, but more just the hue. Okay, there we go. So now that's starting to read a little bit better. And then I can do the same thing here with the part above the eyelid. Although I just destroyed her eyebrow, but that's okay. I can come back in. Another painter that I look at that I really admire is Jeremy Lipking, not to be confused with Malcolm Lipke. And Jeremy is just one of those amazing painters. Will always be a standout. Just I can see a lot of influence of John Singer Sargent in his work, but over the years he's just really taken the work in a very personal direction. But his what is the word? His ability, he's really pushed. Um, his technical ability is just so out there. It's just really amazing to look at his work. It's just some of it's just really quite breathtaking. I did see a portrait that he did at the um, American Portrait Society. I think I'm saying it right. Or portrait. Yeah, I'm getting it completely butchering it. Uh, Portrait Painters of America. I don't know if that's right. My dyslexic brain sometimes mangles names beyond recognition, and I can't remember what anything is. Um, Portrait Society of America. I think that's right. Anyway, so he won Best in Show at one of the competitions. So he had a piece that was displayed at at the conference that I went to, and you just stand there and you just want to cry a little bit because you just know that you're never going to paint anything like that. You're never going to get there. It's fine. It's fine. You can have those moments, and then you just realize you just got to get back to work. After that. Um, yes, I consider myself an alla prima painter because I paint wet into wet. I mix the colors into other colors. I just actually, there's a Facebook group for alla prima painters, and one of the questions they ask you before you join the group is that, do you consider alla prima painting only when, I forget how the question was worded, but only when you're painting um, in one sitting. And I always thought of alla prima painting as this idea that you're painting wet into wet paint. I know that the literal translation means that all at once, but they took it to mean more kind of as a orthodoxy that it's only when a painting is done in one sitting can it be considered an alla prima painting. And I've been down this road with some other um, painting groups or other schools of painting where there is this sort of orthodoxy. Oh, you can only use these colors, or you can only paint this way, or you have to um, mix these colors and whatever it is, and otherwise you're not doing it right. And I always thought that that seemed kind of arrogant to me. Like it's, you know, I mean, I guess there is some exceptions to that. Like if you're part of a plein air painting competition, that you would kind of expect that the painters are painting outdoors from what they're looking at the moment, and not like later dragging it into the studio and painting on it, um, or doing a studio painting but more or less outdoors, that they're actually trying to paint what it is that they see in a way that sort of creates that kind of effect for the viewer. And so you have to, if it's a competition, you have to put certain rules down around it. But when it comes to, for the personal work of the artist, it really can be whatever the artist decides is the constraints that they want to put on themselves. I always find it a little um, arrogant when one artist starts to create rules and constraints that they judge other artists by. And so they sort of put artists in a box. Well, he uses black in his shadows. He can't be an impressionist. He's not a true painter, or he's devalued in some way because he's not painting in this way. And so I tend to disagree with that whole kind of idea, that sort of, like I said, orthodoxy of ideas of what paint, of what makes a good painting and not a good painting, and what makes a good painter or someone who's a true painter. Um, because everyone does it just a little bit differently. At the end of the day, there are no real rules. Um, okay, so let's see where I am on this. Okay, so Ripon asks, please pardon me if I ask stupid questions. I'm being a beginner. I tried to follow the exact colors from the beginning. Right now, if I was painting, I would have gone more orange in it. Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. Part of the problem is that what you see on my monitor is not really what I'm seeing. I can look on my screen. Let me just drag this over so you see what I'm seeing. I don't know. It's going to take a few seconds for that to come over so you see the infinite view. But if I wait about 10 seconds, yep, there it's coming over. So if I look between the colors that I see, let's drag it down a little bit lower. Oops. Okay, I'm starting to get a little dizzy here from this because I have the screen on the screen. Um, just give it a second. Why is that? Okay, there. Okay, now I'm really confused. Okay, so if I look between what I see in the monitor and what I see in the monitor, they're different colors. So that means there is some color shifting going on, and even the colors here in in Jensen's forehead, that's actually pretty close to what we're seeing here. So that color is reading pretty well. It's the color in my painting that looks a little bit, it looks too cool or weird. And because, this is an electronic medium, this is painted medium, and then you're seeing it through a video feed. So those colors are really going to shift. Um, that's not to say that I've matched the colors perfectly, because I haven't. Let's see. Okay. Let's get that back over there where it belongs. I think I have two of the screens open. That's why I was getting confused. Let's close one of them. Okay. So, but what I'm seeing in the painting is actually a lot closer to um, what's in on my monitor, the reference on the monitor. Okay. So, I want to straighten out her nose a little bit. Um, Actually, I need a little more bend up here. get the values right and the colors right for this. And then her nose is a little bit straighter than I have it, and I do this area, I'm a little bit more, I'm not concerned about the likeness, I just want to get the same, similar feeling. Okay. Yeah, this, unless I'm very careful, I'm not going to be able to get to match that that line of her nose just right. So it does kind of a little bit of an accent there. It is moving away from us in space, and I haven't really gotten that in yet. Just right at the tip of her nose. Some of this stuff really just requires patience and sometimes perseverance. Just keep on going, keep on adjusting something until it starts to feel right, without, you know, without overworking it. Sometimes the painting doesn't need to be perfect in that way for it to work as a painting, but I do want a certain amount of the painting, to the anatomy, to look right. There's just a little bit of orange here on outside the nostril, the flare of the nostril, but there's just a little bit darker red here to tell you where the top is. And let's see if I can get really drill down into the inside of her nostril there. So really punch up that accent a bit. I think I have to do it again. Kind of wiped it out there. Okay, and this one on this side has to go a hair higher. There's going to be some parts, some features in the face where it requires a lot more accuracy, just because the foreshortening or the placement is so sensitive and critical that you just, if you just have it off just by a hair, it just looks wrong. What did I just do? Made a mess there. Got a little purple in the paint, and that stuff is so strong that it overpowers everything else. So I gotta knock that back. Okay. I can deal with that later. Okay. I'm spending too much time on that nose, and it's not helping. Could have just left it. Okay, that actually did help. Let's get a little more thicker white here. A little bit yellow. Okay. And then just little subtle things. See this little bit of a darker shape? This is where the curl of the lip is. It is really subtle, but it is one feature of the face that is helping us understand what's going on. And that same little bit of a darker shadow is on the upper part of her lip right there too. Okay, and that's just telling you that the lip is turned up enough that it's creating a little crease right there above the lip. And then I really want to get that dark accent here in the corner of the mouth, even if I'm a little bit the wrong color, it's fine. I can push push that up a little bit here on the side. Okay, let's get a little orange and white going there. Okay, and same on this side. Okay. So what I'm feeling is that I feel like she's looking straight at us in the reference, but I kind of feel like when I look at her face in the painting, she's looking off to the side. And that's just having to do with the placement of the irises there and the pupil inside. I just need to move them over just a little bit. The whole thing. So I'm almost repainting it. So it looks so nice, but I really want this. I want her to be looking at us, so I have to move it. And so, seeing if I can manage to do this without spoiling it too much. And that sometimes it's, making sure you're coming in with enough new paint and doing it in a direct enough way so that it reads kind of the same way that the original past does. I'm going to be painting out that highlight because I'm going to move it over. This is where I was talking before, like I'm not afraid to repaint something. I can just go for it. And okay, that's better. Now she's looking at us. So I'm going to try to get a little bit of that white highlight in. Okay, not too bad. And I want to make sure there's a little bit of a bluish gray here that helps create a little bit of depth to the where the separation between the eyelid and the light of the eye. I can also play that from the other side by coming in a little bit lighter here. And then pulling that corner underneath. Okay, and then I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to go a little bit lighter in the bottom portion of this eye, just to get that sense of the light coming through. Okay, great. That's feeling like a little bit better. Okay, so let me see if I missed any questions. So Jason was born, asked, is that a canvas or gesso board you're painting on? So these are Speedball Mona Lisa panels. You can get them in in a multiple of sizes from Dick Blick. Dick Blick also has the best prices on these panels. They run for an 8x10 panel. It's about $1.30. Can't find gesso panels anywhere close to that price. And I think that price is actually if you're buying 10 at a time. And the surface is way too slick for the kind of paint that I do, but I find if I put one additional pass of gesso on them, then they're perfect. They have the right amount of tooth and absorbency for me, and I like them just like that. Can't beat the prices, and once I gesso them the way I want, they're perfect for me. I encourage you to try them. I know an artist that she likes them. She's a oil painter, does a lot of alla prima plein air painting, and she likes them really slick. She's just learned to paint on them that way. She bought, she must have bought a whole case of them and realized that they were kind of had this weird slickness to them and was going to just return them all or something, and then she just started painting on them and figured out how to paint on them that worked for her technique. And I think it had to do with the amount of brushes and medium that she used. Maybe she used a lot of liquid or something, and maybe that helps. And just builds up a certain amount of tackiness so the paint stays in there. Okay. Okay, so I'm at the point where I can start working out a little bit, filling in some of the rest of the areas of the painting. I can get out my big brush and come in with a lot of black and start to get her shirt or sweater or whatever it is, and that sort of merging with her hair. I've pushed both the hair and her sweater very dark, so they do kind of lean towards black. Let's see if I get this top of her shoulder in the right place. Yeah, not quite at the bottom here. Okay, so right there. I think I have to go up a bit higher. And that's about parallel with the highlight in her chin, I guess you would say, up here. So this is, the dark is coming up that high, which is really where her shoulder is. So it looks like her shoulder is coming out towards us here. This is probably the seam of where her shoulder would be, and it's coming forward like this because this is her, oh, that's her other arm. So this arm must be dropping down out of the picture. Can't really see too well because it's just a big mass of black, which is fine. I like the abstraction of it and the graphicness of it. And I can get kind of crazy with the paint strokes here and create a little more interest. Yep. And I have this shape that got a little bit too much white in it. Let's clean that up a little. And this edge, I want to make sure that it's interesting. I don't know if I'm going to put another color here to paint back and forth. So I know this is where her arm's dropping down, even though you can't necessarily read it. There's a little bit of light coming in right on this edge. Okay, great. So I'm just going to leave it just like that if I can. There is these couple areas of white that I can come in right on top and put really thick paint for interest. I think might be good if I can manage to not play with those too much. Just leave it just like that. Well, now that I said that, I do want to put a little bit of distance between them. Okay. Alright. So, now the hair. The hair. Okay. Sorry. Getting a little fatigued here. So we're about an hour and 40 minutes in. I may go for another hour or so, try to finish this up. Yeah, it's looking a little bit on the stylized caricature side, which is okay. It's sort of going in that Skip Lipke, Malcolm Lipke direction a little bit. I have to decide if that's where I want to leave it or I want a little bit more realism to it. I just want to add, I think I have enough Gamsol to keep on going. Okay, so more questions, please. The more you ask me, the more um, keeps my brain going and the more entertaining this little demo is. Instead of just me jabbering on about I don't know what. Um, so, okay, I'm going to get the hair going a little bit. Um, it says, James, AJ, have you tried using your paintings to pick up chicks? Um, Not so much. I'm happily married and um, not really interested in that. But I guess for some artists, that's sort of the deal. I'm um, trying to figure out how to become a better painter. That's why I spend my time painting. Um, and I guess I don't know if is that really the attractive thing. I mean, hey, I paint. Um, it's not really what I'm after. Um, okay. Um, Let me see. Do I like Nick Alm? Okay, wait, I missed the question. What is your artistic background? Did you go to school? That's Dalton asking that. Um, so I went to Art Center College of Design. That's got a bachelor's in fine arts illustration. So what I learned there was all kinds of different mediums and techniques. A little bit different than studying under in a school like the Art Students League or the um, is it Palette and Chisel that's in Boston, where it's sort of you, or even the Florence Academy, where there's this kind of one overall outlook about painting. You're not learning every technique and medium. You're just sort of going after the 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 main uh, technique of the school, and that you're sort of learning that, and especially something like the Florence Academy, where you're learning to paint from sculptures. You're drawing sculpture, and then you're building up an under drawing, and then you transfer that under drawing onto a canvas, and then you do the painting. You do a grisal, sort of a black and white or a sepia version of the painting, and then you come in with you glaze colors on top of that, and you work the colors in from there. So it's a very deliberative process, and everyone who goes to that school learns that process, and that is the process of the school. So where I went to school, where I learned illustration, the idea was they were teaching you every technique under the sun, and it was up to you to develop your own style. And so the big thing about Art Center, it was training you to be an illustrator. They were sort of endorsing you developing your own style for the market. You had to figure out what that was. And in a way, I didn't really develop a style. I just was more about learning, trying to figure out how to paint and paint somewhat realistically, and just that was kind of enough. And so that's when I came out of school. I hadn't really mastered oil painting per se, but I did know that what direction I was headed in. And that's actually after I had initially gone to school for mechanical engineering. I also have a bachelor's of science in mechanical engineering. So I really got both sides of my brain going there. And but after doing that a little bit, trying to find work in engineering and not, and sort of at the time it was really hard to find gainful employment. Um, I just, in a way, I just decided that isn't really what I wanted to be doing ultimately. So why was I beating myself up about trying to get engineering work? In the end, after doing various odd sort of computer job kind of things, that I decided to go back to school and do what I kind of had a little more passion for. And so that's sort of how I got going in this direction. And right now, I actually work full time doing front end web development, designing websites. So that's sort of the bread and butter. And I'm painting more for me, but in a way, I've been getting more and more portrait commissions and selling the work. So when I can get that, I'm happy to do it and don't mind getting paid for doing something that I'm enjoying doing. Um, Let me see. Um, did I miss how many questions? Um, do I like Nick Alm? Yes, I really like his work, and he's sort of in that direction, very painterly, but also has a high sense of realism and that kind of dichotomy between the brushwork and the sense of realism. Um, Jason really likes his work. I think it's, there are some pieces I've looked at of his that are just like, oh my God, how did he do that? Yes, Nick Holm is insane. Um, I know, it's ridiculous. Mario Rinaldi says, your jabbering is very interesting to another painter. Okay, so um, let's keep on going here. So I'm kind of liking the fact that it's not, this one is sort of a little bit of a caricature, kind of going in that Skip Lipke direction. I may just decide to keep it that way. I'm kind of curious too, like how this idea sits with the rest of my work and what kind of response it gets. Um, Kind of let the masses decide a little bit whether it approves or not. Um, so the question is then, how do I resolve this area of the hair, and what do I do with this side here? I've left so much of this white space, and it's kind of pure. If I kind of paint into it, then I'm kind of committing to it, to put another color in the background. I think right now I'm going to leave it white if I can, and just play around with this edge, the strokes, and see if I can get a little more interest here. See where her ear is coming in. It's like slightly lighter color. If that is actually her ear, it's not just a bunch of hair. But I can just pretend like it's her ear and just get a bit of the light that's hitting there. Okay, I can just leave it just like that. It doesn't have to be so, um, doesn't have to be detailed. It can be really understated. And I just want to soften up this edge here, get it a little bit darker. And okay. So I do want this chin just, it was supposed to be a little bit darker, but it got a little bit too light. So have to see if I can knock that back down a few steps. I think that's helping. And then I want to pull this paint stroke around, follow the form, and then knock out that little bit of white that's sitting there. And see if I can get just a touch of green in her yellowy green orange, just in that area that's just below her eyelid here. That's one color there, but I want to keep the eyelid, lower eyelid, reddish that's coming through here. And this eye really isn't resolved yet like the other eye. I need to move the pupil over. Okay. if you like Yuan Aglow, big fan of his. Actually, I don't know who that is. I'll have to look him up. Um, so this spot right here, it's not, the black isn't sitting so easily. So just don't, just maybe coming in a little bit too stiff a brush so it's not laying down. So I I'd gone a long time being very frustrated with my portrait work. I was doing a lot of plein air painting, but then I would get into my basement and I was like, I really want to be doing portraiture, and I would be try and try, and I'd be working from photographs from bad color printouts before I really started working off the monitor, and with not very good lighting and there was lots of variables that were sort of working against me, and I didn't really understand where I was defeating myself. And part of it was, I would work for spurts of time, a month, and then I would kind of give up for a while, and then I would try it again later. And so it took me a long time to realize that partially what I was doing wrong is that I just wasn't spending enough time focused on those things that were causing me a lot of problems, and trying to figure out how to solve them so that I could go get on to the next sort of challenge. And so there was all kinds of things. The lighting that I was working in wasn't balanced, was too bright, and the um, so that wasn't balanced. The surfaces that I was working on, the canvas wasn't the right surface for how I painted. The stiffness of the brushes wasn't quite right. Um, the texture of the surface, the absorbency, all these like little factors of how I painted that I just wasn't really experimenting enough to figure out what was going to work for me and what wasn't. And so when I really decided like I needed to spend a lot more time consistently doing this, sort of kind of almost like a daily practice, but at least 10, 15, 20 hours a week minimum, doing it for extended period of time over, now it's been maybe 3 years where I've been painting consistently, um, about 20 hours a week. And I can say like that's what it took really to get past some of these issues that I'm having, is just spending the time um, experimenting and understanding the mediums that I'm working with, the brushes, the surface, the lighting, the setup, how I have my setup now with the monitor and my easel. Took a while to figure out. I'm just working at a desk, but just having the arrangement right that facilitated me doing successful work. It took the time to sort of work out all those variables. I mean, a good example of this is that I decided to try working on panels after painting on canvases for years. And the panel, when I first started painting on it, the panels were too slick and the brushes were too stiff. And what happened is, when I tried to put down successive brush strokes, I was picking up way too much paint in each stroke, and so I was pulling up more paint with each stroke than I was putting down, and that definitely wasn't working. And it took a lot of time figuring out, oh well, maybe I needed some synthetic brushes that were softer so that I wasn't pulling up the paint, or maybe I needed to put more gesso on so the surface had more tooth and was more absorbent. So just kept on playing with the variables, sanding the gesso, trying different stiffnesses of brushes, trying to work with thinner and thicker paint, changing my lighting, changing the size, the setup of the photo that I was working from. And just actually getting on Sketchy actually helped, where I had a lot more photos to choose from, and that I had a large reservoir of photos that I could always pull from, so that I never was spending so much time waiting for the next, figuring out what the subject matter was that I was going to paint, that there was always a pool of photos that I could draw from, so that I could just paint more often, more quickly. And that's what I have to say is, like, I think that's where a lot of people fail, is they're just not spending the time to get past some of those little um, technical um, hurdles, that they'll end up being stuck at a hurdle because they're not getting spending enough time to figure out, or they're not asking enough people questions to try to figure out in their head, like, what how can I get past this. And what I find is, when you're spending enough time, you go from one technical problem, and then you're doing much higher caliber of work, and that will lead to new problems, new things, new challenges to solve. And but just by spending the time, you're getting past those, and then you find, if you look over the year or the 2 years that you're spending that amount of time, that you really are the work really is making leaps and bounds of improvement, and that only comes with spending the time. That's that's sort of my soapbox tonight. Is like, you're not going to get there unless you spend the time. And I have a full-time job, so I'm doing this painting work. I'm doing it from 7, 8 o'clock at night until often 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. But sometimes I feel refreshed because I'm really invigorated by the work that I'm doing, and so it can be very meditative and contemplative, and so I don't feel exhausted. I just feel maybe a little bit tired because I didn't get enough sleep, but at the same time, I kind of feel like that's where I want to be. That's what I want to be doing. So, um, okay, she's looking pretty good. I just want to put a little more texture in her hair, and it's 11 o'clock, so I've been at this for, it's only been 2 hours, but it's made quite a bit of progress here. Um, do want to get her fingertip. I think that's, it's not so visible in the painting, but I really like the shape of it, so kind of has that John Singer Sargent shaped finger thing going. And so I just want just a little bit. I think that highlight was just a little bit too strong, so I can knock that back. And then I can just put a little bit of an indication of a fingernail. Yep, that's nice. Okay. And then I see these strands of hair that are a little bit lighter that are coming across here. That are adding interest. So this is where I want to do a lot of editing and a lot of deciding what I want to put in the painting and what I don't. So I like this sort of graphicness of the brushwork and the hair, but I do want to get a little bit more complication in this sort of the tangles of hair on the outer on her outer edge. So I can just start to build up a little bit of that. And I do want to keep it so you can tell it's brushwork, that it's hair but it's brushwork. And that's, I think once I do that, then it's going to be pretty close to being finished. I think there's a little some spottiness here. I want to soften up some of the transitions in the face, but um, sometimes you have to stand back from the painting and say, okay, how's it going, and what is it that I want? Where do I want it to go? And make some real kind of decisions about it, as opposed to just painting along and just letting it happen. Okay, so have this bit of color, but I want to really emphasize the brush stroke again. There's lots of places where there's sort of this curl around that's happening. I don't have to paint every lock of hair. I just want to get the general feeling of it. do want to get a little more realism in this one lock of hair here. The way it's transitioning from the reds into the browns. Okay, and so without ruining the graphicness of that, I do want to get a little bit of the highlight in the hair. I want to say that's almost has a little bit of blue in it. If I can manage to do it in one stroke and not ruin everything, then I will do it. Well, it's not one stroke, but a couple strokes. And then do the same thing there. Okay, that's almost too much, so gotta be really careful here. Okay, what did I say? There's a little that it was a little bit blotchy in a couple spots. I'm just actually have no paint on the brush. I'm just coming in and pulling off a little bit of paint. Try not to do this too much because you can really get something that looks over blended. But if there's some areas of transition that are just too hard, doesn't hurt just to pull a little bit of it off. You can still get the sense of the brushstroke texture from the dry brush pulling the paint around a little bit. And white here, just go, I want to go lighter along the nose. Remember I said there's that bright white in the middle there. I can just make that a nice thick stroke. Okay, that's cleaned it up quite a bit. And then see if I can get that turn of the mouth here. That's too red and pink. Let's do it a little bit less. And just there's a little bit of shadow underneath the mouth, and this is where I want to feel the pull of the hand. There's a little bit of tension in there, so there's going to be some stretched, thinned lines, and then a little bit of compression. I need a little bit smaller brush to get this. So this right in here, and I need to add a little bit to the hand because it needs to be a little bit further over. To get, I want to really feel the compression here and then the stretching here. Stick with me here, and I want that to continue with the shapes of and the chin. Okay, and then I need to I almost get my darkest dark is right here, at least in the shadows in the face. And that's going to pull up into that area where the hand pushes against the chin there. Okay. Let's get a little more of this knuckle in the hand. And this here I can come in with much thicker paint. This is going to make that heel of the hand come forward a little bit. Let's see. Can I just lost Mr. B? Okay. So let's see if I missed any questions. From London, what brushes do you prefer? Do you find sable too soft? Well, I don't like spending the money on sable brushes. They're very expensive, and I find that there's lots of synthetic brushes out there that have that kind of softness to it that are just a few dollars, and I tend to destroy brushes, so I'm not going to spend a fortune on brushes. If you can see, most of my brushes are just like worn down to almost nothing in a lot of cases. I think this brush used to be a lot longer. And but I do like a combination of softer and harder brushes. What is the name of the Alla Prima page on Facebook? I find that very interesting if you can recall it. I think it's just called alla prima. If you search that in groups, then you'll find this alla prima group. And the moderator that insists that you only put work that you painted in one sitting. And there you go. Okay, I want to bring this reddish orange, even though it's not really doing that so much in the photo. I just want to have this come forward a little bit, the little bit of the hair, movement of the hair against the darker shapes there. It's kind of fun. Okay, so it just needs like a little definition here, some darker darks, and to get that I need black. I need black on my palette. I've run out of black. So again, I'm using this, well, I think I talked about it on Instagram before I came here. I did a little bit of a live rundown of some of my painting tools. So this is this the right one? Oh, that's ivory black. How did that get in there? I'm looking for my chromatic black. It's a Gamblin color, and it's made by mixing phthalo emerald with quinacridone red. They're very highly transparent, high tinting strength colors, and they're exact complements. So when you mix them together, they make a perfect black. And unfortunately, my bag of paints, I can't really see into it so easily. Oh, there it is. So this is the chromatic black, and yeah, there. And this is a gambling color, and it's a mixture of those two colors, and I happen to have those two colors on my palette too, so I could theoretically mix this black if I wanted to from the colors that are already on my palette. And for the purist out there, I'm not a purist, but there's purists out there that say, oh, you shouldn't paint with black. Well, here's a black that is made from the colors that would end up on a lot of painters' palettes anyway. So you can say that they're not really painting with black because it can be mixed. But I'm trying to punch some darks here in the sort of grayer black area, because I guess a little bit of white got mixed in there. But it just needs a little more definition here. Just want it to have a little bit of sort of underneath. And okay, I think that's okay. That's about the amount of complication that I was looking for. Let's have some dry brush strokes here too, I think. Yep, that's what it needs. And a little bit of red back here to feel like there's a little more hand there. Give her a knuckle. Okay, so it's 11:15. I think this is very close to being finished. It feels like the way I want it to feel. Just gonna fix a little bit of the anatomy here in the finger. There's this lock of hair here, and it's almost like perfectly aligned with where the dark is of her finger, but it's too black. I almost want to paint it out and repaint it as that shape of her finger, and then come back in with the black of the hair after I've resolved that. So I'm just going to see if I can do that real quickly here, because it's competing a little bit with trying to describe a little bit of the anatomy of the hand there. Don't have to go crazy with it. I just need just enough information so you understand what's going on, but trying to keep it simple. Okay, let me see. Do you paint your friends or family often? Any tips for photographing them? So I'm almost exclusively using third-party photographs at this point. I do have a portrait or two of every one of my family members, and but then at some point you kind of feel like you want to paint other people, not just your family. And you can see, like, if you look at Sorolla's work, or William Merritt Chase, um, um, Thayer also is another one who did a lot of paintings of his own family, and that works for a while, especially if you're lacking models. But I kind of like this idea of painting selfies or images from social media, and can find a lot of diversity there of images and quality images that I don't think I'll ever run out of inspirational images there. Okay, getting a little too overdone with the hand, so I want to make sure that if I'm gonna put that much into the hand that it's going to be right, or I'm gonna knock it back a bit. Soften up some of that there. And I really do want to make the heel of the hand feel right. This is, get enough of the red in there that you would naturally see that transition of color from the side of the hand to the inside of the hand. And this turn, I have it painted right, it just feels too thick right there. So I'm going to work to thin that out a little bit. Yeah, that shape looks just a little awkward there. So this is where I'm going to take a little artistic license and just trim that, make it a little different than what's going on in the photo. And and I just think I have it drawn a little bit differently too. So I'm just going to try to come down a little bit straighter and then come down a little bit lower here. Okay, that's feeling a little bit better. Okay, and I do want to get that little bit of light that's coming through the hair. And since my background is white, that little bit of light has to be close to white too. Yeah, I'm not sure I like that. Thought I'd like it more. I want to soften up this transition a little so I can feel the chin moving back in space. Okay. Let me see. Someone better ask me a question soon or I'm going to go into silent mode, which is fine. Um, if you're just entertained just watching me paint, that's fine. I didn't end up being quite as thick as I wanted to in the paint here. I want to get a lot more paint down and a little bit thicker. Just trying to refine the shapes in the fingers a little bit. It's feeling a little bit better. Kind of feeling like, I know it's actually drawn pretty accurately, but it feels like she's missing a little bit, too much of her head. And it's partially the way her hair is matted down in that one spot. It's coming through, and I kind of feel like there just needs to be a little bit more there to feel like it's um, that she's not missing part of her head, which is fine. Okay. Okay. Just gonna come in with some thicker paint that's a little